Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our weekly webinar. Today, we're going to go ahead and get started. Just a little housekeeping before we get into the topic today. Just as a reminder, these webinars are intended for educational purposes only, and while we hope that you learn new information, the trainers presenting these webinars are not attorneys. Therefore, all information provided during the presentation and the Q&A session should not be construed as legal advice. In addition, for this presentation, all medical-related information presented herein is provided by the CDC official website. The presenters do not have medical degrees and are therefore not offering any form of medical advice. All right, well, with that out of the way, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brianna Grimes, and welcome to our webinar titled Best Practices for Flu and Allergy Season During COVID-19. That's a mouthful. This webinar is presented to you by Pay Entry, and I'm really excited to be your facilitator for today's topic. Let's get started. So today we're going to be talking about the flu versus COVID-19 based on what the CDC website and the CDC has posted. How does allergy season fit into everything that's going on right now? How to protect yourself and your employees, employer do's and employer don'ts. And then we will end with a Q&A session. So feel free to use that question box throughout the presentation to type in any questions that you have, and I'll go ahead and answer all of them at the very end. All right, so let's talk about the flu versus COVID-19. So ever since March of this year, I'm sure many of you have been bombarded with information regarding COVID. However, a lot of that information primarily dealt with answering questions like, what is COVID? How does it affect my business? And how do I protect my employees? Which are all really great questions. And hopefully up to this point, most of those have been sufficiently answered. However, I'm not certain that many of you, like me, did not anticipate COVID-19 to continue into fall of this year. Most of us thought it was going to be over by summer. So now we have a new question that we're facing. How do we deal with COVID-19 in the midst of flu and allergy season that is typical of the fall? Well, let's address this by talking about the flu versus COVID-19. So according to the CDC website, there are some key similarities between the flu and COVID-19, as well as some key differences. Now, the key similarities that you should keep in mind are that they are both contagious respiratory illnesses and they are both caused by viruses. Granted, they're different viruses, but they're viruses nonetheless. Because of these similarities, they also share a lot of the same symptoms, as well as having varying degrees of these symptoms, ranging from asymptomatic, meaning not showing any symptoms, to highly severe and hospitalized. We will talk about these more in depth in later slides. Now, as far as their key differences go, COVID spreads more easily than the flu. COVID is more serious for some people than the flu. And people infected with COVID are contagious for longer. Then with the flu has a vaccine that we all know about, whereas COVID does not have a vaccine as of yet. So those are some of the key similarities and differences between the two as defined by the CDC. Now let's take a look at these symptoms for these different viruses. All right, so we're going to take a look at the shared symptoms between COVID-19 and the flu. They are fever or feeling feverish/chills, coughing, shortness of breath or difficulty breathing, fatigue or tiredness, a sore throat, runny or stuffy nose, muscle pain or body aches, headaches, vomiting, and diarrhea. And this last symptom is more common in children than in adults. Now, their symptoms are so similar that the two infections are almost indistinguishable without a test to confirm. This is why it is always encouraged, even on the CDC website guidelines, that people are encouraged to get tested if you or any of your employees experience any of the symptoms, or if you know that you have come into contact with someone who has tested positive for COVID-19. The only difference between these two infections is that the flu tends to have more mild to severe symptoms, and their symptoms usually develop within 1 to 4 days after being infected. So if an employee has a family member that has tested negative for COVID-19, but family member had the flu, it is very possible that the employee may show flu symptoms in the next few days because they were exposed to the flu. In addition, a person with the flu is primarily contagious for up to 7 days after their illness has subsided. On the other hand, for COVID, this can be asymptomatic, again, meaning they have no symptoms showing, or this is a more serious illness with the added symptoms of a change of a loss of taste or a loss of smell. So, in addition to those other symptoms that we talked about on the last slide, COVID is also tied to loss of taste and loss of smell. COVID-19 symptoms can arise anywhere from 2 to 14 days after infection. It is also still under investigation as to regarding how long someone is contagious with COVID. However, as of right now, the CDC is saying about 10 days minimum after symptoms appear, but they do not have a maximum number of days they're willing to disclose at this time. Now let's talk about allergy season and how it compares to these two viral infections. All right, so on top of flu season, complicated by COVID, we now have allergy season coming up. Now, allergy season can depend on where you live, but it usually occurs at springtime and late summer into early fall. The good thing is that most people who have seasonal allergies know they have seasonal allergies and they know when they're going to come. For example, my allergy season is March through May and late September through mid-October. I know that these are the periods where I look like death. My eyes are itchy and watery. I'm sneezing and coughing all the time. Now, during allergy season, people will typically show similar respiratory symptoms to COVID, such as coughing, fatigue, headache, sore throat, and congestion or runny nose. They may also have the shortness of breath or difficulty breathing that is found with COVID, but only if they have an underlying condition such as asthma that's compounded with their allergies. So that's not a typical symptom of allergies. However, allergies tend to have the added symptoms of, like I said, the itchy and watery eyes and the sneezing, which is not typical of COVID-19. So if you're in the office and people around you start sneezing, try to abate the panic of their fellow peers. Sneezing is probably more in line with allergy season than it is with COVID or the flu. And again, like I said, most employees who have seasonal allergies know that they have them. It happens every year to us. I warn everyone when I'm in allergy season so they don't freak out when I sneeze and cough. But I also let them know that, I do have allergies, so I don't want to sneeze or cough on them either. So, however, you can't be too cautious, and rather than just assuming that it's allergies, a COVID-19 test is always a definite recommendation to take just to confirm that that is not the case. So it seems like there's going to be a lot of coughing, sneezing, and sniffling going on from now until the weather warms again. So what can you do to help protect yourself and your employees? Well, the first thing is to encourage your employees to get that flu vaccine. It will not prevent COVID-19, but it will reduce the likelihood of illness due to the flu. And it will also help to conserve medical resources in hospitals for people who need to be treated for COVID-19 symptoms. Last season, at least 410,000 people were hospitalized from the flu, which the CDC estimates could have been a lot less if more people would have received the vaccine. Now, the CDC recommends getting the flu vaccine before the end of October for the most effective benefits for the flu season. And if you work in a large office building with other companies, you might be able to work together to offer a flu vaccine clinic that comes to the lobby of the office building where they will administer the vaccines by appointment during work hours. Another option might be to allow your employees an hour of paid time off at the end or the beginning of their shift to go get that flu vaccine. Another protection that we are all familiar with is to continue social distancing as much as possible at work and to encourage quarantine for any employees that are sick, have been exposed to COVID, or have recently traveled. If you're not doing so already, I would encourage doing a weekly or a monthly hygiene education lesson during a company or team meeting where all the managers talk about the importance of good hygiene and cleanliness practices. Educating employees and encouraging them to use these techniques to keep each other safe is the key to effectiveness. The CDC is constantly updating their website with things that they are learning as they are studying COVID-19 and the effects. So it's a great resource to use if you want to circle your conversations with your employees around what the CDC is releasing on a daily and weekly basis. Now, if you have brought your employees back to work, make sure that you or your facilities team is keeping the soap in the restrooms well stocked, that you have plenty of hand sanitizer and disinfecting products available to keep the work area clean. In order to engage your employees, you can even try to make a game or an activity out of it. One company I work with decided to do a caught sanitized game, and if a manager saw you sanitizing your hands, workstation, common area, or if you brought a sanitizer from home and it was on your desk, they would give the employee a $5 Starbucks or gas gift card. It isn't much, but the employees really loved it, and it was keeping them engaged and safe while having fun. And I guarantee you some employees were probably sanitizing more than they would have if there wasn't that incentive. The most difficult part of COVID-19 crisis is the fact that it feels like almost every state and city is handling the pandemic a little differently. States like California are still in lockdown for more industries, whereas other states like Florida have almost everything pretty much open for business. Some cities require masks, other cities don't care to enforce it, so be sure to keep up to date with your local state and city ordinances. If you're an HR Services Basic member with us, you can always reach out to Kathy or myself to get help with locating the ordinances that apply to you. We can also research the ordinances and do a compliance audit, and if you're our premium or ultimate members, the audit is included in your package. Now, as open enrollment approaches, you may want to talk to your benefits broker about adding what's called teledoc services to your medical plan. These are becoming more and more popular, and employees love the option of talking to a doctor digitally for a $10 or $20 copay and getting their prescription sent directly to their pharmacy without ever having to leave their bed. With social distancing and digital services becoming more common due to COVID-19, it might be beneficial to offer these even if you only offer them through 2021 until this whole COVID thing is under control. These services are great addition to your benefits packages, and they keep employees from missing a lot of time to go to the doctor, especially if they're only sick with the flu, allergies, or a common cold. The last technique I would recommend is to find a way to incentivize safety. Most employees do not want to go home, get tested, or quarantine when they're sick because they're worried about their paycheck. However, staying at work and infecting the rest of your employees doesn't do you any good either. If your company is not eligible for FFCRA, I would encourage you to find a way to incentivize or help employees afford to stay home and keep their peers safe. Even if you have to take it out of the holiday party budget of 2020, I am sure your whole company will thank you for keeping them safe and sacrificing that holiday party. Now, there are a lot of legal landmines to navigate when it comes to employees being sick, and some of them may be even more stringent depending on the state that you're in. However, here are a list of some general do's and don'ts to help you get through flu and allergy season this year. Do take temperatures using a contactless temperature check. This is a great screening ability to protect your employees, especially if your work environment cannot social distance 100% of the time, or if your employees come into contact with customers daily. Just remember that you must record and maintain all temperatures as a confidential medical record in a manner that is compliant with the law. State and local laws may be more stringent and should be considered first. In some states, you may not be able to do temperature checks. The EEOC has released that employers are allowed to send employees home or require that they stay home if they are showing symptoms of COVID-19. Now remember, these symptoms are similar to the flu and allergies, so if there are an abundance of COVID-19 related symptoms, you should also encourage them to go get tested. I would also recommend keeping a list of the major symptoms from the CDC website for your place of business and have employees do a self-check against the list each day before coming to work. If an employee has any of the symptoms, communicate to them that they are recommended to stay home. You can also require that any employee stay home if they have confirmed that they have come into contact with someone with a positive COVID-19 test, even if the employee is asymptomatic. So if they're not showing any symptoms, but they know for a fact they came into contact with someone, you are allowed to require them to stay home for quarantine period. Now, while you're not allowed to require a doctor's note or a copy of their COVID-19 test, if an employee provides these documents, they are sufficient to have an employee return to work. Another symptom guideline issued by the CDC states that an employee can generally return to work from either COVID-19 or the flu once they have gone without a fever for 24 hours without any fever-reducing medication. So typically, once someone's fever has subsided and they're no longer on those medications, within 24 hours, that is the least likely that they are going to be contagious, and they should be able to return to work at that time. You can also screen new hires for COVID-19 once a conditional job offer has been made. Now, you can also ask them about any recent travel to ensure that they have not visited highly infected areas. If you decide to screen all new hires for COVID-19, and you must do it for everyone if you're going to do it, you have to do it before their first day. You're also permitted to delay their start date because of COVID-19 symptoms or a confirmed COVID diagnosis. Now, be aware that some state laws may restrict employers from screening at all, or they may require you to cover the cost of any of the screenings that you require. So refer to your state and local laws before starting any type of screening procedure. So let's talk about the don'ts. Do not force an employee to come back to work if they are not able to, or if they're still ill, or if they have a family member in their household that is ill. You don't want to possibly expose your other employees to COVID-19 due to gross negligence on your part. If you're still working remotely and you have not yet reintegrated everyone back into the workplace, you should also be sure not to force employees to return to the office if they have a protected reason, such as being high risk, having a disability, or any underlying medical condition that could be complicated by COVID-19. It is always recommended that when you start opening up your offices again, that you do so on a voluntary basis at first. Do not defy any state or city ordinances in order to conduct business. I know this seems like a no-brainer, but it's always good to restate. If your city or state is still fully or partially locked down, either in your area or for your specific industry, you need to stay compliant with their ordinances and guidelines until they are officially lifted. Also, do not deny FFCRA leave requests unless the employee is not eligible based on the guidelines for FFCRA, or if your company is not required to offer it. However, keep in mind that ADA, FMLA, and other state leaves may still apply if you do not offer FFCRA. And finally, don't be so rigid that you're not willing to be flexible, understanding, or willing to make accommodations. Right now, everyone is in the same boat as everyone else. There's an evil, scary virus out there, and we're all doing our best to keep from getting infected by it. Part of that is stressful and terrifying at the same time. So be open to your employees' accommodation requests if they're reasonable. And also keep in mind that anything we as employers are doing during this pandemic will not necessarily set a precedent for the future because of the extreme circumstances under which the country is functioning right now. All right, well, that is all I have for you. I know that was a ton of information. Hopefully it was good information. Remember that if you are one of PayEntry's payroll clients, you are also an HR Services Basic member, which means that you have access to Kathy and I for any questions that will help you navigate these types of situations and this upcoming flu season. So before we end today, let me see if we have any questions at this time. Do you have any recommendations for apps that we can use for employees to record their daily COVID pre-screen? I personally have not had any encounters with apps. I know there is one company called Qualtrics that is offering some pre-screening services. I don't know what their price range is, or even if they're offering any free versions, but that's the only one I've heard of. I can do some research on that and I can get back to you on that and see, but I don't have any personal experiences with any. Any other questions at this time, guys? All right, well, it doesn't look like there's any more questions. So thank you all for your time today. I hope you learned a lot of great information from today's presentation. We'll see you again next week. We're going to be talking about going to the polls, voting leave laws, and dealing with political tension at work. So really excited for that webinar. Don't forget to register. We'll see you guys next week.